The cold rain didn't bother Carol as she walked. It soaked through her clothes, clinging to her skin. The street lights looked like blurry stars in the downpour, and their long reflections danced on the wet ground. She just wanted to get away from the memory of that dinner table. Hours earlier, she thought she was starting a new chapter of her life. Daniel, the man she had been with for almost a year, had invited her to meet his parents. He said it with his charming smile, the one that made her feel safe. "It's time you meet them, Carol. You're important to me." Those words played in her mind as she got ready. She picked her outfit carefully, telling herself this was it. Maybe he would propose soon. But nothing could have prepared her for what she walked into. The Miller family was incredibly rich, in a way Carol had only seen in movies. Their house wasn't just big, it looked like a museum. The dinner table was huge, and even though only four of them were sitting there, it felt miles long. From the moment she said hello, she felt like she was in a world where she didn't belong. His mother's eyes swept over her, cold and calculating. His father's handshake was firm, but without any warmth. She tried to smile, tried to breathe, and tried to ignore the knot of nerves in her stomach as they started to ask questions. They weren't questions to get to know her. They were questions to measure her. Curious, where did you go to school? Why a community college and not a university? Isn't dressmaking a bit limited as a career? Does your family own a house or do you rent? Each answer seemed to make their low opinion of her even lower. And Daniel? He just sat there, fidgeting, but never spoke up. He never once said, "She's wonderful and I love her," or even, "Mom, Dad, that's enough." He kept his eyes down as if he was ashamed. Carol left before dessert. She couldn't sit there another moment pretending her heart wasn't breaking inside. She had hoped, maybe foolishly, that Daniel would follow her, that he would grab her hand and say he didn't care what they thought. But he didn't. He stayed behind. Now, she was walking through the rain, holding her purse tightly to her chest as if it could keep her dignity from falling apart. She thought about going straight home, but she couldn't. Her mom, Mary, has a heart problem. Stress is bad for her, and she is very sensitive to Carol's moods. She couldn't just walk in crying, couldn't let her see the shame on her face. Her mom had been through enough already. She didn't need to carry Carol's pain too. So she kept walking until she saw the warm lights of a small coffee shop. She went inside, shaking the water from her hair and wiping at her face, pretending the streaks on her cheeks were just rain. The smell of coffee wrapped around her like a warm blanket, and for a moment she just let herself breathe. But then the truth hit her. This wasn't just about Daniel or his parents. This was about her. About every time she told herself she wasn't good enough because she didn't have a fancy degree or a rich family. About every late night she had spent at her sewing machine, building a small dream she thought didn't matter. And about how she had put so much hope into someone who, when it mattered most, stayed silent. She held a warm cup of coffee and looked out at the rain. It blurred everything outside, cars, lights, people rushing by. But it couldn't blur the truth she was finally starting to see. This wasn't the end of her story. Maybe it was just the rough, messy beginning of something she hadn't yet imagined. When Carol was a little girl, it was just her and her mom. No brothers, no sisters, no dad at the door. Her father had left before she could even remember him. Her mom never said anything bad about him. She just said some people aren't ready to love the way a family needs. That was all Carol needed to know. They lived in a small apartment. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Or it was rented and filled with love, which felt like the same thing. Her mom worked as an assistant at an insurance office, always busy with papers and phone calls, but always with a gentle smile. Even on days when Carol could see how tired she would come home, hang up her coat, and ask, "So, Carol, what did you dream about today?" Her heart condition wasn't something Carol understood as a child. She just knew her mom would get out of breath on the stairs or need to sit down when her chest hurt. As Carol grew up, she realized how fragile her mom was and how strong at the same time. Doctors had told her years ago not to get pregnant because of her weak heart, but she decided that a life without Carol wasn't worth living. Whispers, "I wanted you, Carol. You were my dream before you were even born." Because of her mom's health, Carol learned to be independent early. While other kids were outside riding bikes, Carol was learning to make simple dinners or fold laundry so her mom wouldn't have to push herself. It never felt like a burden. Her mom had given her everything, and helping her felt right. But the biggest gift her mom gave her was creativity. She was the one who taught Carol to sew when she was 9. Her old sewing machine was loud and stubborn, but it could still turn fabric into something beautiful. Carol remembers sitting at that machine, her feet barely reaching the pedal, sewing crooked lines on old scraps of fabric while her mom clapped like she had just finished a runway show. Excited, "Your hands are gentle, Carol, and that means you'll make something beautiful out of this world." By high school, Carol knew she wanted to design and make clothes. Not big fashion lines, just simple, elegant dresses that made real women feel special. She didn't have the money or the grades for a fancy design school, but she enrolled in a vocational program after graduation. People sometimes looked at her funny when she said she was going to be a seamstress, as if it wasn't a big enough goal. But her mom's eyes would light up every time she saw Carol working, and that was enough. They didn't have a lot of money, and sometimes it was hard. There were Christmases with handmade gifts and birthdays with just spaghetti, but they laughed a lot. They made jokes about their old squeaky couch, painted the kitchen cabinets themselves one summer, and turned the living room into a fake runway when Carol finished her first real dress. Still, there were nights when Carol could hear her mom crying softly in her room, trying to be quiet so Carol wouldn't notice. She knew her mom worried about the future, about what would happen if her heart got worse, and about how Carol would take care of herself. Even though she was young, Carol promised herself she would find a way to make life better for them. That promise is why she worked so hard, why she took extra shifts at the alteration shop, why she rarely went out. Meeting Daniel felt like the universe was finally rewarding her for all that hard work. He made her feel seen, like someone finally understood that she wasn't just a girl with a sewing machine. And maybe that's why his silence at dinner hurt so much, because it broke not just the idea of him, but the idea that all her hard work had finally led her to someone who valued her. Her mom didn't know any of this yet. She only knew Carol had gone out to meet someone important and hadn't come home with the happy glow she expected. She was waiting, fragile and hopeful, completely unaware that her daughter's heart had just been cracked open. But Carol wasn't ready to tell her, not yet. Her mom had enough to deal with. And soon, Carol would find out her mom had more to face than either of them realized. I still remember the first time I met Daniel Miller like it was yesterday. It was at a small charity dance my friend Clara had begged me to attend. I almost didn't go. I was tired from working a double shift at the alteration shop, and I didn't own anything that felt right for a fundraiser. But Clara insisted, and I gave in, pulling out a simple blue dress I'd made myself months earlier. The place was beautiful. Lights were wrapped around the pillars, soft jazz music played, and people mixed and mingled in suits and dresses that cost more than my monthly rent. I felt out of place the moment I walked in, holding a cup of punch like it was my shield. And then Daniel walked over. He wasn't like the others, at first glance. He didn't have the arrogant smirk I'd seen on some of the guys there. Instead, he had this warm, confident smile, like he actually wanted to talk to me. His dark hair was neat, his suit was clearly expensive, but there was something easy about him. "Is this your first time at one of these?" he asked, leaning in so I could hear him over the music. I nodded, smiling nervously. "Is it that obvious?" He smiled a little. "Nah, but that's not a bad thing. Sometimes the people who don't belong here are the most interesting ones." I laughed, feeling an unexpected spark. We talked for what felt like hours that night, about my job, his business school studies, and our favorite places to eat. He didn't seem bothered when I said I was a seamstress. In fact, he looked impressed. You actually make clothes? That's amazing. I can barely sew a button back on. From that night, things moved fast. He called the next day, took me out for coffee, then dinner, then movies. Daniel had this energy about him, like life was a game he already knew how to win. He came from money, that was clear, but he never rubbed it in my face. He drove a nice car, wore watches worth more than my whole closet, but he still laughed at my thrift store jokes and said he liked my home-cooked meals more than anything fancy. For months, I let myself believe I'd found someone who really saw me, someone who didn't care that I didn't have a degree from some big university or a family name that people knew. But there were small signs I ignored, like how he never really invited me to his family's get-togethers or how he changed the subject when I asked about his parents. "They're private," he would say. "You'll meet them eventually." And I held on to that eventually like it was a promise. I imagined meeting them and proving that I was worthy, that I wasn't just some girl with a sewing machine, but someone who could build a future with their son. Daniel seemed to like my independence. He would watch me work late at the shop, sometimes stopping by to bring me coffee, saying, "You're the hardest working person I know." Those moments felt real. He even talked about travel plans, New York for the holidays, maybe a road trip next summer. I thought he was serious about us. Looking back, I wonder if he ever was, because when he finally said, "It's time you meet my parents," I thought it meant he was ready to take the next step. But maybe it was just a thing he needed to do, one more thing to make his life look complete. I told Mom the night before the dinner, excited. She smiled so big it almost brought tears to my eyes. "See, I told you, good things happen to good people, Carol," she said, touching my cheek softly. I didn't tell her how nervous I was about impressing his parents, about not being enough. The truth was, I was terrified, but I wanted to believe in Daniel, in us. That's why I said yes, why I put on that soft peach blouse I'd sewn myself, why I practiced polite conversation in my head on the way there. I had no idea how much that one night would change everything. When Daniel told me his parents wanted to meet me, my first reaction was excitement, quickly followed by panic. "Friday night at our family place," he said, casually, like it was no big deal. "Just dinner, Carol. They'll love you." I smiled and nodded, but inside I felt the weight of it settle like a stone in my stomach. His parents owned many businesses across the country: car dealerships, real estate, even a part in some tech company. They weren't just comfortable, they were the kind of wealthy that made headlines when they gave to charities. And me? I was just a girl who fixed wedding dresses and hemmed pants for people who couldn't afford new ones. Still, I tried to be positive. Maybe they'd see how hard I worked, how independent I was. Maybe they'd see I cared for Daniel for who he was, not for what he had. Friday came with a steady rain that wouldn't stop all afternoon. I wore a soft blue dress I'd made from a discounted piece of fabric, simple yet elegant, with modest heels. I couldn't afford a taxi, and Daniel was busy at work, so I took the bus across town. That's when I saw her. The bus was almost empty, but at the front, a frail woman in a tan coat and knitted hat stood, holding an old cloth bag. She was arguing quietly with the driver, her voice trembling, crying, "I just need to get to the hospital. My grandson's there. I'll pay you back tomorrow, I swear." The driver shook his head. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but I can't let you ride without a ticket." People looked away, pretending not to hear, but I couldn't. Something about the way she stood there, trying so hard to keep for dignity, even as tears filled her eyes, hit me in the chest. I stood up and walked over, taking out enough for 2 tickets. "Here," I said softly, handing the driver the money. The woman turned to me, startled. "Oh no, sweetheart, I can't." "It's fine," I said, smiling. "Just sit down. You said hospital, right? Which one?" She hesitated, then whispered, "North General. My grandson had an accident. They say he'll be okay, but I need to be there." I nodded. "Then you definitely shouldn't be standing here arguing for a moment." A look of relief crossed her face, and she grasped my hand. Thank you. I don't know how to repay you. You don't have to, I replied, moving back to my seat. She sat across from me, still holding her bag tightly. After a moment, she spoke again, her voice quiet but warm. I'm Mrs. Lewis. And you are? Carol. Carol Jones. She smiled faintly. Carol, you've got a kind heart. The world doesn't see enough of that anymore. We rode in silence for a while after that, the only sounds being the hum of the bus and the rain on the windows. She got off 3 stops before mine, turning to wave at me. I'll remember this, sweetheart, she said. I smiled back, thinking it was just something people say. At the time, I had no idea how much that moment would matter. By the time I arrived at the grand estate, the light rain had become a full downpour. Their house loomed like a mansion from a movie, columns, beautiful gardens, and even a fountain at the front. I stopped at the gate, took a deep breath, and told myself to hold my head high. I could do this. Inside, I wiped the raindrops from my dress, practicing polite greetings in my head. Smile, shake hands, compliment the home. Don't talk too much about work unless they ask. I thought the hardest part of the night would be my nerves. I didn't realize it would be something much worse. Something that would make the bus ride, the rain, and even the worry about my dress seem so small. The butler, I didn't even know people actually had butlers, opened the door and led me into an entryway so big it could have held my entire apartment twice over. Marble floors, a chandelier with crystals, and a staircase that curved like something from a classic drama. I smoothed the skirt of my dress and tried to swallow the lump in my throat. Daniel came down the stairs, smiling that easy smile I'd fallen for. You made it, he said, kissing my cheek quickly. For a moment, I relaxed. Maybe I had overthought this. Maybe his parents really would welcome me. He led me into the dining room, where his parents were already sitting at a table big enough to host a small wedding. His father, tall and broad-shouldered, stood slightly to shake my hand. Miss Jones, he said, polite but distant, like he was meeting a business partner he didn't plan to see again. His mother, in a perfect cream blouse and pearls that probably cost more than my car, gave me a once-over and a smile so tight it could have cut glass. Carol, is it? We've heard some things. Her voice trailed off as if there was more she wanted to say, but chose not to. I smiled, pulling out a chair. Thank you for inviting me. Your home is beautiful. His mother tilted her head slightly. Yes, we do our best. She didn't ask me to sit. She just went back to adjusting her napkin. Dinner started with small talk, the weather, a local charity event they were sponsoring, a new investment Daniel's father was making. I tried to add little comments here and there, but every time I did, there was a pause, a glance between them, the kind of glance that says, she doesn't belong here. Then came the questions. So, Carol, his mother began, her fork gently clicking against her plate. You're a seamstress? Yes, I said, trying to sound cheerfully. I design and alter dresses, mostly bridal and formal wear, but I'm hoping to expand into custom evening gowns. She murmured. And where did you go to school for that? I went to a community college here in town, I replied. Her lips curved into something that might have been a smile, but wasn't. Oh, not a 4-year university. I felt my face get hot. No, ma'am, I chose a faster program so I could start working and helping my mom sooner. Helping your mother? Daniel's father jumped in, his tone curious but with a sharp edge. Is she unwell? I hesitated, wondering how much to say. She has a heart condition. I live with her so I can help when she needs it. His mother's eyes flicked toward Daniel, then back to me. How admirable, she said flatly. The rest of dinner continued like that. Questions that weren't really questions, compliments that felt like tiny cuts. Do you rent or own an apartment? How many clients do you have? Have you ever thought about changing careers? It wasn't what they said, it was how they said it. I could feel myself getting smaller with each passing minute. And Daniel, he just sat there. He laughed at his father's jokes, nodded when his mother spoke, but he never once stepped in to say, "She's wonderful and I love her." He didn't defend me, didn't make the tension easier, and didn't even look me in the eye when I tried to catch his gaze. By the time dessert was served, I wasn't hungry anymore. I put my napkin on the table and forced a smile. "Thank you so much for dinner. I'm afraid I need to get going. Early morning at work tomorrow." His mother's face didn't change. "Of course, it was enlightening to meet you." I stood up, holding my purse, waiting and hoping for Daniel to follow me, to at least ask if I was okay. But he stayed seated, saying something quietly to his father, as if I had already left. So I walked out alone. The rain outside was even heavier, but I didn't care. Each drop hid the tears running down my face. I wrapped my arms around myself and started walking. The sound of my heels hitting the wet ground covered up the ache in my chest. Somewhere deep down, I knew that night wasn't just a bad dinner. It was the end of something I had believed in, and maybe, in its own painful way, the start of something else entirely. When I finally made it home that night, I stood in the hallway for a full minute, trying to force a smile onto my face before opening the door. My mom's health was delicate, and the last thing she needed was to see her daughter broken and soaking wet like a character in some tragic movie. I took a deep breath, wiped my face with my sleeve, and stepped inside. "Carol, is that you?" Mom called from her bedroom. Her voice was as gentle and warm as always, but there was a hint of tiredness underneath. "Yeah, Mom, just got in." I kicked off my wet heels and tried to sound cheerful. "It's pouring out there. I think I set a new record for walking in heels." She laughed softly. "That's my girl. Did everything go well tonight?" I waited for just a moment before answering. "Yeah, it was fine. Just tired, that's all." I could hear the blankets rustling as she moved in bed. "You work too hard, sweetheart. Don't forget to rest." "I won't, Mom," I said, heading straight to the shower before she could see my face and ask the questions I wasn't ready to answer. Under the hot water, I let myself cry again, quietly, so she wouldn't hear. The sting of humiliation from Daniel's silence, the cold judgment in his mother's eyes, all of it washed away and swirled down the drain. For the next few days, I threw myself into work, hoping that if I stayed busy enough, the ache would go away. But life, it seems, had more storms waiting. One morning, I found Mom sitting at the kitchen table, pale and holding her chest. "Mom, what's wrong?" I rushed to her side, and she tried to wave me off. "Just a little dizzy. It happens." But I could see the truth in her eyes. She was scared too. We went to her heart doctor that afternoon, and after several tests, we were sent to a specialist at North General. He was kind but direct. "Your mother's condition has gotten much worse. The medicine is no longer enough. She needs surgery, and soon." My heart dropped. Surgery? How soon? "Within the next month. Ideally within a few weeks. Without it, her risk of heart failure goes up a lot." I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Okay, how much will it cost?" He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything before he even spoke. For someone without insurance at this level, we're looking at, well, somewhere in the range of $80,000 to $100,000. I felt the air leave my lungs. That was more than I made in 2 or 3 years. "Is there any help program?" "There are charity programs and grants," he said, "but most are for children or certain groups of people. I can give you a list of foundations to contact, but," his voice softened, "be prepared for it to take time." Time. That was the one thing we didn't have. That night, I sat at our tiny kitchen table long after Mom went to bed, staring at the crumpled list of phone numbers and websites the doctor had given me. I called every single one over the next few days, explaining our situation, begging for help. Some were polite but firm. "We're not taking new adult cases at this time." Others didn't even call me back. One woman sighed and said, "I'm sorry, sweetheart, but this just isn't the kind of story that makes people want to donate. If you had young kids at home or some tragic accident, people react differently." I wanted to scream. My mom's life was on the line. Wasn't that enough? Finally, out of pure desperation, I did something I promised myself I wouldn't do. I called Daniel. He picked up on the second ring, sounding surprised. "Carol, hey, I wasn't expecting to hear from you." "Daniel, I wouldn't be calling if it wasn't serious," I said quickly, my voice already shaking. "My mom needs surgery, heart surgery, and we don't have the money. I thought maybe—" I swallowed. "I thought maybe you could lend me some, just until I figure something out. I'll pay you back every cent." There was silence on the line. Then a quiet ha-ha. "Carol, come on, really? I knew something like this would happen eventually. My mom literally warned me about this exact thing. She said if we broke up, you'd probably find some excuse to—" "Daniel, that's not what this is," I cut him off, tears burning my eyes. "I'm not asking for me. I'm asking for my mom's life." "Yeah, well, I'm sorry she's sick, but I'm not a bank. Don't call me again, okay?" And with that, he hung up. I stared at my phone, the words still ringing in my ears. Don't call me again. For the first time in years, I felt completely helpless. My world had narrowed to two impossible choices: watch my mom's health get worse, or find a miracle. And miracles, at least in my experience, didn't just show up. But sometimes, kindness has a way of coming back to you when you least expect it. 2 days after Daniel hung up on me, I sat on a bench outside North General, my head in my hands. I had spent the morning at work but couldn't focus, so I left early. Mom was inside getting tests done for her surgery, even though we still didn't know how we would pay for it. I stared at the cracked ground, feeling like life had just pulled the rug out from under me. That's when I heard a familiar voice. "Sweetheart, Carol, is that you?" I looked up, blinking through tears. Standing in front of me was the elderly woman from the bus, the one I had bought a ticket for days earlier. Her tan coat was the same, her eyes still soft, but now brighter. "Mrs. Lewis," I said, surprised. She smiled and reached for my hands. "I told you I'd remember you. Are you all right, honey? You look like I did the day I lost my husband." I shook my head, embarrassed. It's just been a bad week. My mom's here. She needs heart surgery, but we don't have the money to pay for it. I don't know what to do." For a moment, she looked at me, then slowly sat down beside me. "You're the girl who gave me bus money when I had nothing in my pockets. You didn't even think about it, did you?" I shrugged. "It wasn't a big deal." "It was to me," she said firmly. "That day, my grandson was hurt in an accident. If not for you, I would have missed seeing him awake for the first time." She looked over her shoulder and waved. "Julian, over here." A tall man in his late 20s walked toward us. He had kind eyes and a calm confidence, like someone who had been through hard times and come out stronger. "Grandma, who's this?" he asked, smiling. "This is the young woman I told you about, the one who helped me that day," she said proudly, as if I were family. "And she needs help now." I wanted to protest, to tell her she didn't owe me anything, but the words got stuck in my throat. Julian sat down on my other side. "Tell me what's going on." Something about his tone, steady, no judgment, broke whatever wall I had left. I explained everything. Mom's worsening heart, the cost of the surgery, the calls to charities that went nowhere, and even Daniel's refusal to help. My voice cracked more than once, but I kept talking until there was nothing left to say. Julian didn't hesitate. "Curious? How much do you need?" I blinked. "What? No, I'm not asking you for money." "I know you're not," he said calmly, "but I'm offering. My company is doing well, and honestly, it's the least I can do. You helped my grandma when you didn't have to. You gave her dignity that day, and I don't forget things like that." Tears spilled over my cheeks. "Julian, it's too much. I can't." He shook his head. "You can and you will, because this isn't charity. It's an investment in someone who clearly deserves it. Your mom deserves to live without worrying if her daughter is drowning in debt." Mrs. Lewis placed her hand on mine.
You helped me see my grandson. Now let us help you keep your mother." For a long moment, I just sat there, holding both their hands, overwhelmed by the pure kindness of strangers who suddenly didn't feel like strangers anymore. Julian pulled out his phone. "I'll call the hospital billing department and make arrangements. And Carol, what do you dream of doing besides worrying about bills?" I hesitated, then smiled shyly. "I've always wanted to open my own bridal studio, designing custom dresses instead of just altering other people's work." He grinned. "Perfect. Once your mom's healthy, we'll talk about that too. I know a few people who love supporting local talent." I stared at him, stunned. "Why would you do that for me?" His expression softened. "Because kindness deserves to be paid forward, and because you remind me of my grandma. Quiet strength, even when life's unfair. People like you, you're rare." For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. Not the weak, desperate kind, but something real, steady, like the first warm day after a long winter. As we walked back into the hospital together, I glanced at the gray sky outside and felt something change inside me. Sometimes life breaks you so you can see who is truly there to help pick up the pieces. The surgery was scheduled for the next week, and thanks to Julian's immediate help, the hospital cleared the financial hold in less than 2 days. I couldn't believe it when the billing manager called me directly to confirm. Excited, "Your mother's surgery is fully paid for. You don't need to worry about payment." I sat there in stunned silence before whispering thank you over and over until my voice gave out. On the morning of the procedure, Mom gripped my hand as they wheeled her into the operating room. "Carol," she said softly, "don't let this scare you. Life has a way of turning pain into something beautiful. You just have to let it." I smiled, though tears blurred my vision. "I'm not scared, Mom. Not anymore." The surgery lasted 6 hours. I paced the waiting room holding my phone like it was my only connection to life. Julian and his grandmother stayed with me the entire time, bringing coffee, making quiet conversation, and even distracting me with funny stories about Julian's childhood mistakes. It felt strange how they were strangers just a week ago, and now they were my lifeline.
Finally, the surgeon walked out with a tired smile. It went perfectly. She's stable and resting. With proper recovery, she has an excellent chance of a full life. Relief crashed over me like a wave, leaving me shaky but lighter than I had felt in months. I thanked him, thanked every nurse in sight, and then collapsed into a chair, crying, not from fear this time, but from pure gratitude. The next few months passed in a blur of hospital visits, medication schedules, and slow recovery. Mom grew stronger each week, her cheeks gaining color, her laugh coming easier. Only after 3 months did her doctors confirm she could return to her normal daily routine. She kept saying, "I feel like I've been given a second life." True to his word, Julian didn't disappear after writing a check. He visited often, bringing flowers for Mom and coffee for me, asking about my dream studio as if it wasn't just small talk. One afternoon, while Mom was napping, he sat at our tiny kitchen table, spreading out some documents. "I wasn't joking about investing in your future, Carol," he said. "I know you want your own bridal studio. I want to help you make it real." I stared at him, stunned. "Julian, you've already done too much." He smiled. "You call saving a life too much? This is nothing. I've seen your work. It's amazing. You don't just sew, you create moments people never forget. You deserve the chance to do it your way." It took some convincing, but eventually I said yes. Not because I wanted charity, but because I finally believed I was worth believing in. 9 months after my mom had fully recovered, Carol's Bridal finally opened its doors in a cozy downtown space. It had taken months of planning, getting licenses, renovations, and building my client list. But at last, the dream was real. Mom stood beside me at the ribbon cutting, tears in her eyes, holding a bouquet Julian had given her. That day, as I looked at the small crowd cheering us on, friends, clients, even Julian's grandmother, I realized something important. Family isn't just who you're born to. It's who shows up when everything falls apart. Julian became a constant presence, not just as a business partner, but as a friend and maybe something more. Though we never rushed it, there was comfort in the slow, steady way our connection grew, rooted in trust rather than infatuation. One afternoon, a young bride-to-be came into my shop, shy and quiet, saying she didn't feel beautiful in anything she tried on. I worked with her for weeks, creating something just for her. When she finally tried on the finished gown, she burst into tears. "I feel beautiful again," she whispered. Those words stayed with me long after she left, because they echoed my own journey. I had felt broken and small, unworthy of love or dreams. But through kindness, both given and received, I had found myself again. Standing in my studio, surrounded by silk and lace, I thought about Daniel for the first time in months. Not with anger, not with regret, but with a kind of distant gratitude. If he hadn't failed me, I might never have walked the path that led to this life, these people, this healing. Sometimes heartbreak isn't the end. Sometimes it's the push you need to discover where you truly belong. And as I watched my mom laughing with Julian's grandmother in the corner, both of them healthy and full of life, I realized something. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. And it all started with one simple act of kindness on a rainy bus ride. One moment that proved the world can still surprise you in beautiful ways.